Today we're going to do an exhaust servo delete on a 2006 CBR1000. We're eliminating all this hardware here and then the cable comes down and that operates the stock butterfly valve on the factory exhaust. So if you go to an aftermarket slip-on, you no longer need that. If you're installing the exhaust, all this should already be off anyhow and it's an easy time to get to it. If you don't have the whole rear cowl off, you might be able to get away with just pulling off the seat. Otherwise, you might have to pull the cowl if you need the extra clearance to get around there. As for what we're trying to do for the dummy switch, basically we're wiring this. This is from the CBR forums. It's going to have a 220 ohm resistor, a 4.7 kilo ohm resistor, and a capacitor. It's a 470 35 volt. I was able to get all of these. I got both sides of resistors and the capacitors. This was about $6 on eBay, and I've got about 3,000 left over. I'm also preheating the soldering iron. We're not going to solder this together yet until we already have that out because we have to use that factory plug over. So that said, let's get this all pulled off while that is preheating.
In theory, there's only 2 bolts holding this in, but I couldn't make this too easy. The nut that's on the back side of one of these 2 bolts is surrounded by plastic normally, and when I went to unsecure it, it actually snapped the plastic around it, so the nut just kept spinning every time I went to remove the bolt. As a result, I had to pull the battery out of the bike as well as try to remove the license plate bracket that I have on the bottom of the bike. This would give me a good enough position to try to grab that nut that kept spinning and try to remove those bolts with the leverage that I needed. At least that's what I thought. I ended up failing to grab the nut and the bolt with a pair of channel locks, so I ended up notching the plastic around the spinning nut using a Dremel tool. I then worked the plastic back and forth until it broke free and pushed the solenoid out. It was then time to cut into the factory harness and get our servo delete ready. After laying out the resistors and the capacitor that we were going to be wiring in, I stripped the end of the wires on the factory harness, and then I got to soldering after that. I quickly remembered that soldering does not like 25-degree temperatures like those that I'm working in right now. Because of this, these probably will need a longer time exposed to the heat in order to solder properly. As a result, because these are shorter lengths of wire, I'm more likely to burn my hands, so I moved this over to the vice grip to give me an extra set of hands so I don't burn myself when I'm trying to get everything connected. Once everything is properly soldered together, I'm using shrink wrap to try to seal this so that moisture doesn't create any issues with it down the line. It's ready for install once the shrink wrap is complete.
So this is the servo eliminator all finished. If I were to do this again, I would change these wire lengths, leave the green one a little bit longer, or shorten the red and the brown one significantly. That way everything is the same length and it's not kind of bent out of shape. But either way, this is done for now, so I'm going to plug this in and I'm going to put the battery back in the bike, and then I'm going to test fire it, make sure I'm getting no engine lights, and if that's good to go, then we are set.
Before reinstalling the battery, I make sure to tighten up my license plate bracket, then I install my servo delete, and then I put the battery back in place. After this, the bike is ready for a test fire.
Just test fired the bike with the servo delete installed and the battery back in. The lights are on the dash, so that's a good sign. Obviously, when the season is here and it's a little bit warmer out, I'm obviously going to take the bike out and test it on the road to make sure that it stays off. But in the meantime, this is a really good sign. There's a lot of people who, the second they unplug it, immediately get a light on. Now is the fun part where we get to pretend we're actually good enough to notice this much weight difference, but we're going to weigh it anyway just to see what we took off the bike. All right, so that's 12 ounces even, and if you take this piece of plastic corner that I notched out so I could actually get this thing out, it is still 12 ounces even. Okay.